Good morning, class.
Good morning, ma'am.
All right, before we begin with our day, let us have a short prayer first. So, bow your head and close your eyes and feel the presence of the Lord. Lord God, thank you for today. Thank you for giving us strength to continue this day. May you please guide us and give us strength and give us a wisdom for us to be able to learn new lessons for today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. So now before we proceed with our lesson, let us have a short recap first. So, what have you learned from our previous discussion? Anyone?
Ma'am,
Go ahead.
based on our previous discussions, we have learned about the parts of speech and the subject and verb agreement.
Okay. How about the subject and verb agreement? What have you learned?
For the subject and verb agreement po, I have learned that the subject and verb, if we are going to use those in a sentence, they should be aligned in each other. So, for example, ma'am, if we are going to use a singular subject, we are also going to use a singular verb. As well as if we are going to use a plural subject, we are also required to use a plural verb.
All right. Very good. How about the parts of speech? What are those?
We have learned po that there are 8 parts of speech, namely the noun, pronoun, verb, adverb, adjective, preposition, conjunction, and interjection.
All right. So those are important things that we need to consider and we need to learn for us to be able to use the English language effectively. So in subject and verb agreement, the basic rule there is if we're going to use a singular subject, our verb must also be singular. If we are going to use a plural subject, we should also use plural verb. So those are the important things that you need to keep in mind. So now, before we proceed with our lesson, I want you to access the link that I'll be sending here in our chat box. So please access the link and I want you to write there the words that came into your mind when you hear the word literature. I'll give you 3 to 5 minutes to accomplish it, okay? And later on, we will discuss it. Is it clear?
Clear po.
Okay. So your 5 minutes is over now. Let's take a look at your answers. So, when you hear the word literature, the words that came into your mind are what?
Ma'am, books,
Books. What else?
poem,
Poems. What else?
words and writings,
Words and writings. What else?
art po,
Art. Okay. What else?
authors,
Authors and stories. So those,
stories.
yes. So those are all related to literature. Now, I have a question. Since you have mentioned there that literature is associated with stories and books, what was the last story or the last book that you have read? Anyone?
Ma'am,
Okay, go ahead.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs po.
All right, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Can you tell us about this story?
Yes, ma'am. So, Snow White is a princess living with her stepmother. So, her stepmother, the evil queen, forces her to work as a maid. So, the evil queen has a magical mirror which responds to her daily question, who is the fairest in the land? And the magical mirror always responds that the fairest in the land is the evil queen. But one day, when the evil queen asked the magical mirror the same question, the answer wasn't the same as before. Instead of the evil queen as the fairest in the land, its answer was Snow White. The evil queen became furious and ordered a huntsman to kill Snow White. And then Snow White ran into the woods and there she met the seven dwarfs. Meanwhile po, The evil queen discovered that the Snow White is still alive, so she created a poisonous apple that can only be cured by first love's kiss. She tricked Snow White to eat the poisonous apple and she fell asleep. The dwarfs placed Snow White in a glass coffin in the forest. Some time later, a prince found her lying in the coffin. He kissed her and breaks the spells and awakens the princess. They all rejoice and live happily ever after.
All right, thank you for sharing. And what was the part in the story that you liked the most?
What I like the most, ma'am, is how Snow White is how he treats others and how she is loved by others.
All right, thank you. Thank you for answering. Anyone else? None? Okay, I want to share also the last story or the last book that I have read. It is entitled Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief. I think it as a movie adaptation, and this book was written by Rick Riordan. It took me about 3 days to finish the book because it was a thick book. So what I like the most in the story is that the characters, because characters have different powers because they are all half gods and half mortals. So it is also about Greek mythology. So in Greek mythology, there are three powerful gods. Who are those? Those are Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. So Percy, the main character in the story, is the son of Poseidon. So Percy undergo in the quest just to save his mother. But in the end, Percy got betrayed by his friend. So now, let us now take a look at our lesson for today, which is literature. Can you present now the slide, please? All right, so our topic for today is about literature. Before we proceed with our actual discussion, let's take a look at first what are the objectives that we need to achieve at the end of the lesson. Next slide, please. So the objectives that we need to achieve is that at the end of the lesson, you are expected to define literature, specifically Philippine literature, determine the different genres of literature, and explain the importance of Philippine literature in the present time. So now let us know what is literature. Next slide, please. Okay, who wants to read the slide here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead.
Literature. Literature is a collection of writings in prose or verse, especially writings having excellence of form or expression and expressing ideas or permanent or universal interest. The term literature came from the Latin word literatura, meaning writing or learning, or from the Latin word literatus, meaning literate or learned.
All right, thank you. So from the definition of literature, we can be derived its characteristics. What are those? Expressive or imaginative thoughts, um, expressive or imaginative writings, nobility of thought. When we say nobility, it is in the high class, and universality and timeliness. As such, a literary who is literate or learned in a language or culture of social group. Some of you might be wondering, ma'am, does it mean that only literate person are those people who can produce written works? No. Why? Because being a literate or literate means being able to read and write are those people who cannot only produce written works, but also who can use the language effectively. Okay, next slide please. How about Philippine literature? So Philippine literature is a body of writings by those Filipinos who are not only literate in Tagalog or other Philippine languages, but also knowledgeable in Philippine culture. So Philippine literature is a combination of our own our own tradition and customs, and also literature. So Philippine literature is a collection of written works made by those Filipino writers that expresses our own tradition, our own culture, and our own customs. So now you might be asking to yourself, how does the Philippine literature emerge, or where did it came from? So for us to be able to learn how the Philippine literature emerged, I've prepared here a video clip. Next slide, please. And I want you to watch this carefully, and later on we will discuss it, okay?
Okay po.
So those are the periods of Philippine literature. So what can you notice in the video? How many periods are there? So in that video there are five periods. What are those? Those are the pre-colonial, Spanish colonization period, nationalistic or propaganda revolutionary period, American colonial period, and period of apprenticeship and contemporary or modern period. Alright, even before the colonials came in our country, we already had our own literature which shows our customs and traditions in our daily lives as traced in our folk stories, old plays, and short stories. We also have our own Philippine alphabet before, but since the Spaniards came, they burned it in the belief that they were works of devil or were written on materials that easily perish. Moreover, of the records that remained showed folk songs that proved the existence of a native culture truly our own. Some of these were passed on by words of mouth till they reached the hand of some publishers or printers who took interest in printing and manuscript of the ancient Filipinos. So even before the colonials came in our country, we already had our very rich Philippine literature. But since the colonials came, they influenced us with their traditions. That is why we are now a mixture of a native and a colonial culture. Now, next slide, please. We're going to discuss each period. So the first one is the pre-colonial period. What is the characteristic of pre-colonial period? The characteristic of pre-colonial period is that it is based on oral tradition and it is crude on ideology and phraseology. So in this period, our literature have been transferred to us through traditional narratives, speeches, and songs. So during this time, our literature focused mainly on our ancestors' daily lives and experiences. We have different literary pieces written not only in Filipino dialects but also written in different dialects that we have here in the Philippines. So, some of you might be wondering where does the story about the pineapple having so many eyes and the story about why do we have such thing as multo, manananggal, kapre, duwende. So those are based on our folk stories that came from our ancestors. Now, let's take a look at our literary forms. We have oral literature. We have here riddles or bugtong, proverbs or salawikain, and tanaga. So now, let us discuss the riddles. Next slide, please. Riddles or bugtong, it is a battle of wits among participants. So you need to think about the thing or something that the sentence or the phrase expresses. So do you know any riddles or bugtong? Or have you heard the word bugtong, bugtong, palabugtong? Anyone?
Yes po.
All right. Do you have any examples there?
Ma'am, nagtago si Pedro, nakalabas ang ulo.
Okay, so what's the answer?
Pako po.
Ayan, very good. So another, I have here example. So isang butil ng palay sa klob ang buong bahay. What's the answer?
Ilaw po.
Alright, very good. Why can you say that the answer is ilaw? What is the characteristic of a light bulb and isang butil ng palay?
Maliit po.
Alright, they are both um little or yeah, maliit. And when we say saklob ang buong bahay, does the light only reflect in the specific area of the house?
The entire house po.
Alright, the entire house. The light scattered throughout the house. Now, the other example here is, tumingin ka sa akin nang makita mo'y ikaw rin. What do you think is the answer?
Um, Mirror po.
Alright, very good. It is mirror because when you look at the mirror, what can you see? The reflection of,
Itself po.
alright, the reflection of yourself. Now, now you have understood what is riddle or bugtong-bugtong. Know that we have so many bugtong here, but those two are just an example. Alright, let's go ahead with proverbs or salawikain. When we say proverbs or salawikain, it is a wise sayings that contain a metaphor used to teach a food for thought. So when we say metaphor, it is not the literal meaning of the word. Okay? So know that the proverb also contains a lesson or a message behind it. So I have here an example. Do you have any example? Do you know any example of salawikain
Yes po, ma'am.
that you hear from elders? Yes, go ahead.
Ma'am, kung ano ang puno, siya ang bunga.
Okay, so what is the message conveyed by that salawikain?
Kung ano ang pinanggalingan, ay siya rin ang bunga. Kadalasan ito ay tinutukoy sa pagkakaparehas ng anak sa kanyang mga magulang po.
All right. So we often hear that word, parang pinagbiyak na bunga, something like that. So it means that you are the same as your parents. So I have here an example. Aanhin pa ang damo kung patay na ang kabayo. So what do you think is the message conveyed in this proverb? So it means that what is your help for if the person is already what? Suffering. Okay? And the other one is, pag binato ka ng bato, batuhin mo ng tinapay. So, what is the message conveyed here? Is it that literal na if someone throws you a stone, you will throw a bread or a monay, something like that, to that person? Is it literal?
No po.
No. What does this mean? What is the message behind this? Salawikain.
I think, ma'am, if someone does something bad to you, parang hindi mo dapat ibalik yun sa kanila. Rather,
Alright.
kailangan maging mabait ka pa sa kanila.
Alright, very good. When someone did bad thing to you, don't take revenge in a way that they will be hurt. Instead, take an action in a kind way. Okay? So now you understand what is riddle and what is salawikain. Now let's go to tanaga. What is tanaga? Tanaga is a monorhyming heptasyllabic quatrains expressing insights and lessons of life. It is more emotionally charged than the terse verb and thus has affiliate with the folk lyric. Tanaga consists of 7777 syllabic verse. So when we say 7777 syllabic verse, each line of the poem consists of 7 syllables. So here is an example. So who wants to read?
Ma'am, ako po.
Go ahead.
Sa gubat na madawag, talay mababanaag. Iyon ang tanging hangad, buhay may igagawad.
Alright, thank you. So what can you observe in the poem? Each line consists of 7 syllables. So let's count. Sa gubat na madawag, talay mababanaag. Iyon ang tanging hangad, buhay may igagawad. So those are what? The literary forms or oral tradition under the pre-colonial period. We have riddles or bugtong, salawikain or proverbs, and tanaga. Now you understand where does this sayings came from. Let's go now to the Spanish colonization period. What are the characteristics of Spanish colonization period? So Spanish colonization period has the characteristic of it has two distinct classification. It is religious and secular, and it introduces Spanish as the medium of communication. So, and the literary forms under this are religious literature and secular or non-religious literature. So in this period, when the Spaniards came in our country and influenced us with their customs, traditions, and culture, we adopt some of their beliefs, such as their religion that most of us that until now possesses. What is it? The Roman Catholic religion. Now, in this period of Philippine literature, they also influenced our literature. From our traditional way, they made it more religious it is why that it is why until now we perform their beliefs. They also transferred us their language, which is Spanish. However, do you know that only some people who belongs to elite people or elite family can afford to send their children to school? That is why many Filipino remain illiterate. So we have mentioned earlier that the definition of literate is being able to read and write. And in this period, many people or many Filipinos can't afford to send their children or can't afford to go to school. Why? Because only those people who can only afford or those people who belong to the elite class family can send their children to school. That is why many Filipinos, many people remain illiterate or do not know how to read and write. So they influence us in terms of literature. We have religious literature and secular or non-religious literature. Let's take a look at these literary forms. We have religious literature. When we say religious literature, it is a religious lyrics written by Ladino poets or those verse in both Spanish and Tagalog were included in early catechism and were used to teach Filipinos the Spanish language. We have here Passion. When we say Passion, it is a narrative poem about the passion and death of Christ. The most popular was Ang Mahal na Pasyon ni Jesucristo Panginoon natin by Agino de Belen. And the second is Cenaculo. When we say Cenaculo, it is the dramatization of the Passion. It shows the passion and the death of Christ. Are you familiar with these two terms, the Passion and the Cenaculo? So these two,
Not really, ma'am.
okay, so these two, I think, these are two religious practices that are done country. So these are the literature that the Spanish influenced us. Now let's proceed to secular or non-religious literature. We have awit, a colorful tales of chivalry made for singing and chanting. Example is Ibong Adarna. Corrido, when we say corrido, it is a metrical tale written in octasibic quatrains. Example, Florante at Laura, written by Francisco Baltas, written to prescribe a proper decorum. Example, Maestro Modesto de Castro, pagsusulatan ng dalawang binibining si Urbana at si Feliza. And pagsusulatan ng dalawang binibining si Urbana sons ang bagong Robinson. So while it is true that the Spanish subjugated the Philippines for more mundane reason, this former European power contributed much in shaping and recording of our literature. Literature in this period can be classified as prose and poetry, religious prose and poetry, and secular prose and poetry. Now, let's proceed to nationalistic and propaganda revolutionary period. So what are the characteristics of this period? It is planted seeds of nationalism in Filipinos, language shifted from Spanish to Tagalog, and addressed the masses instead of intelligentsia. Okay, next slide please. So in this period of turning point of our Philippine literary journey, This period marked the beginning of awakening our sense of nationalism. In this period, we learned to fight for our rights through writing. So this is where our national heroes such as Dr. Jose Rizal emerge. So now let's take a look at our literary forms under this period. So we have propaganda literature. When we say propaganda literature, it has a reformatory in objective. Under the propaganda literature, we have political essays, satires, editorials, and news articles were written to attack and expose the evils of Spanish rule. For example, Diaryong Tagalog, which was founded by Marcelo del Pilar, La Solidaridad, whose editor-in-chief is Graciano Lopez Haina, and a political novel, No Limitangere and El Filibusterismo, Jose Rizal's masterpiece, paved the way to the revolution. So these are the propaganda literature that our national heroes used to awaken the sense of nationalism of our fellow Filipino men. Now, let's proceed to the second, the revolutionary literature. The revolutionary literature is more propagandistic than literary, as it is more violent in nature and demanded complete independence for the country. So we have political essays who help inflame the spirit of revolution. For example, Kalayaan, a newspaper of the society edited by Emilio Jacinto, and poetry through Decalogue by Apolinario Mabini, Katapusang Hibik ng Pilipinas, and Andres Bonifacio, Liwanag at Dilim ni Emilio Jacinto. Okay, those are the literary forms that our Filipino heroes used to awaken our sense of nationalism. Now, let's proceed to American colonization period. What are the characteristics of American colonial period? In this period, it has the characteristic of it has it is a period of apprenticeship. When we say a period of apprenticeship, in other words, it is imitation. Filipino writers imitated English and American models. Poems written were amateurish and mushy, which phrasing and diction is awkward and artificial. So in this period, it is where our it is where Americans contributed our Filipino authors in a sense that they adopted or they transferred their English language to our Filipino authors. So we have here short stories such as Dead Stars written by Paz Marquez Benitez, The Key written by Paz La Torrena, and Footnote to Youth written by Jose Garcia Villa, and novels such as Child, Child of Sorrow, the first novel in English by Zilio Galang. So in American colonial period, this is the emergence of Filipino English author. It is the emergence of Filipino authors which uses English language in their writings. Okay, so in this period, many writers arise and became notable because of their literary pieces. It was the time where Philippine literature were recognized. It was also the time when Americans influenced the Filipino through using English as medium of instruction. So next slide please. Let's proceed to contemporary or modern period. It has the characteristics of martial law repressed and constrained human rights, including freedom of the press, and writers use symbolism and allegories to drive home their message in face of heavy censorship. So this is the last period of what? It is the last period of Philippine literature. It was then when the theater was used as a vehicle to protest, such as the PETA. You know what is PETA?
No, ma'am.
PETA means Philippine Educational Theater Arts Theater Association and UP Theater. The flowering of Philippine literature in the various language continue, especially with the appearance of new publication after the martial law and the resurgence of committed literature in the 1960s and 1970s. Filipino writers continued to write poetry, short stories, novellas, novels, and essays, whether these are socially committed, gender or ethnic related, or are personal in intention or not. Of course, the Filipino has become more conscious of his art with the proliferation of writers' workshop here and abroad and the bulk of literature available to him via mass media, including the internet. So those are the timelines of Philippine literature. Now, on on let's proceed to the genres and characteristics of literature. So literature has two general types. We have poetry and prose. What are the difference between the two? When we say poetry is a genre of literature that is written in stanza form. It is characterized by a regular rhythmic pattern, rhyme, horizontal and or vertical measure, imagery, symbolism, and figurative language. So I have here an example of poetry. It is entitled The Road Not Taken. Can anyone read?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Two roads diverge in a yellow wood, and sorry I cannot travel both. And be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first end for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Some were ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference.
All right, thank you. So you can observe there that a poem or a poetry has a stanza. How many stanza are there?
For ma'am,
Four, very good. And it also has a line. And at the end of the line, there are what? There are rhymes. Now, let's look at what is prose. Prose is a genre of literature that is written in paragraph form. Prose is defined as a form of language based on grammatical structure and natural flow of speech. So basically, poetry are in the form of stanza which has rhymes, rhythm, and measure. Poetry are written in an imaginative and figurative form which is said to depend on rhythmic structure using meter or rhyme, while prose is or spoken dialogue, factual discourse, and a whole range of forms of writing. So, when we say poetry, it is in a meter. We follow specific structure. While we say prose, it is written in a paragraph form. So prose are classified into, next slide please, fiction, drama, and essay. Now, let's take a look at fiction. When we say fiction, this includes prose works that tells a story which derives from the imagination, not presented as fact, though it may be based on true story or situation. So when we say fiction, it has short story and novel. What seems to be the difference between short story and a novel? So short story is a narrative prose that has 1 to 10 pages, a single setting, few characters, a singular theme, and a simple plot, while novel is a narrative prose that has about 50 pages or more, multiple setting, many characters, a plurality of themes, and complicated plot. So, in other words, short story is much shorter than novel because some of the novels have series and chapters. So, what are the examples of short story? We have here Lover Boy by Lilia Pablo Amansek. Are you familiar with Lover Boy?
Medyo po.
Okay, Lover Boy is about Rebutnik. It is also a frame story. When we say frame story, inside the story there are characters who also tells story. The Mats by Francisco Arceliana and Dead Stars by Paz Marquez Benitez. These are some of the examples of short story that you might want to read because it has a very interesting characters and very interesting plot, and it is also based on our traditions, cultures, and customs. Next slide, please. How about examples of novels? So we have Noli Me Tangere by Dr. Jose Rizal and El Filibusterismo by Dr. Jose Rizal and Florante at Laura by Francisco Balagtas. So when we say um, those two those two literary pieces that was written by Dr. Jose Rizal has 8 chapters, and those are examples of novel. Next slide, please. So next we have drama. Drama or a play is a narrative prose intended to be performed on stage. It is classified into tragedy, comedy, tragicomedy, farce, melodrama, closet drama, and religious play. So, drama is a form of art that depicts life experiences through reenactment of events that take place in the real world or happen in the mind of the writer. It is like the mirror of life. Drama is derived from the Greek word dram, which means to act or to do, performed on stage or in front of the camera by actors and actresses under the supervision of the director. So the the stories that you are watching in the television are examples of drama. Drama also played in the theater, but it is called a theater play. Now, the last one is we have, next slide please, essay. So essay is a prose work dealing with a single subject, usually representing the writer's personal experience and outlook. So essay, next slide please. Essay is derived from the French word essayer, which means attempt or try. So, an essay is a short form of literary composition based on a single subject matter and often gives personal opinion of the author. Some of the examples of essays are The Miseducation of the Filipino by Renato Constantino and the Philippine Literature Perpetually in Kuwait by Father Berdad. These two essays are, I can say that I suggest you read these two essays because you can get a lesson by reading these two essays. This all, next slide please. So, what's the point? Go back to the slide. So, what's the point? The point here is that learning Philippine literature help us travel or go back to the time where Philippine literature, our literary tradition emerged. Our reading and learning those literary pieces help us know the life experiences or the experiences of those authors, not just by joining them or having them with us, but also through their writings we can see or we can feel what they have gone through. Now, next slide, please. Next slide, please. Do you have any question?
None, ma'am.
None. All right. If none, next slide, please. So, as your assignment, using MS Word, explain the importance of learning Philippine literature. You know how to use MS Word, right?
Yes po.
All right. I will upload these materials in our Google Classroom, and please access it there, and I will post there the template for you to be able to use it, okay? So if you have any questions, just comment it in my post in our Google Classroom. So if you do not have any questions, that's all for today, class. Dismiss.
Thank you po.